James hasn't been before, so those of you that have been, you'll know that I stalk our speakers. No, I do genuinely stalk them. Robin, be afraid. Matt, be afraid. Ian, be afraid. So I try and find pictures that bring a bit of laughter to us, because just to calm the speakers down. So let's talk. Let's see what I picked off Google for James. So James, what do you think the first picture is?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to talk about your scarf and hat colour combination here. There's something, it just really disturbs me. What were you thinking? Green never goes with a mixed colour hat. It just doesn't work. And here's James doing an impression of the guy out of One Direction. I know it's really blurred, but you can't see. It's a great picture. You've got a great mop of hair. I love your hair, James. I'm really jealous. Okay. James is really big in the community. He's done loads. He's spoken at the Leeds Tester Gathering. He's spoken at Leeds Test Atelier. Yep. And he's done loads of talking all around the country. One of the spikes was his talk at Testbash. So who was at Testbash last September? Okay, I think you'll agree that for me, James's talk was the one that really struck me, because there was things that James spoke about that we then went back to work the next day and spoke about. We didn't actually do anything about it, we just spoke about it. No, I'm only joking. But loads of really good feedback about James's talk at Testbash, and that's led to him volunteering his time for nothing to come all the way over from Leeds, from Yorkshire, and give this talk. But you know what? When I stalk people, if you can't see that at the bottom, how the hell did Tim Sherwood, Aston Villa manager, crop up in your search? What's all that about? If you don't know, I'm an Aston Villa fan, so I was really gobsmacked by the fact that Tim Sherwood turned up in your search on Google. Are you a secret Villa fan? Come on, please say yeah. Come on, please. It'll end well for you. Okay, so we are going to flip the slides over, Duncan. Yeah. I said to Duncan, be sharp and on the ball. Okay. So, without further ado, can we welcome up on stage James? Oh, hang on. James Sheasby Thomas. He sounds like something out of the Peaky Blinders, don't you? You're not from the Peaky Blinders, are you? No. Okay. Can you put on a Brummie accent? Just pretend to be. No, okay. Can we welcome on stage James?
You need to pick that on somewhere, probably up on the top.
And let's just put that forward. All right.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks. Great. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks for coming. So today I'm going to talk about accessibility testing, and also just accessibility in general. So what it is, kind of how you can test for it, and also why you should care. So yeah, why, some types of disabilities as well that are relevant to the web, and the key concepts when you're building an accessible website. And I'll finish with some tools as well. So I'm sure everyone's seen these broadband cabinets on the street. Up to here it's fibre, and beyond that it's normally copper cable. Imagine if you have a disability, like you can't use a mouse, and you go to Amazon and you find a product and the buy button doesn't work because they expect you to click and they haven't thought of it. It's that sort of like, you get all the way to the cabinet and then there's crappy cable at the end. It's sort of one way of thinking about accessibility is someone can have all the coping strategies that lots of coping strategies, but at the end of it, they just still can't use your site for whatever reason. Yeah. So, what is an accessible site? Does anyone have a suggested definition of an accessible site? Anything? So, you could say an accessible site could be used by people with disabilities, or you might say that it can be used by everyone. So this is sort of a traditional definition, and this is more, inclusive and so on. So an accessible site also might play nicely with accessibility software or hardware. So this is an accessible switch that connects to an iPhone. It might also meet a specification. and possibly it's well structured or coded semantically and hopefully easy to use as well. So why bother? First of all, it's the law. So the Equality Act 2010 says that you must make reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities to use the web, or any service really. The European Accessibility Directive of 2016 is for public sector sites, and it's much stricter on what counts as accessible. And there's the proposed European Accessibility Act, which would affect all businesses in the EU. So I'm sure your next question is, what about Brexit? So maybe ask me again in next year, March, say, or maybe 2020, 21. Nobody knows. But the thing with the EU is you've got a long lead time on all of these things, so it might come in and we don't know what the deal will be. So it's not an excuse to think, oh well, we'll see in a few years' time. So really, you know, it's Brexit's not an excuse to not do it. So another reason is it's a good business opportunity. So companies like Apple focus on accessibility so much that they can build up a market share in those industries, and you know, people come to them if they have a disability. So this is one of the many accessibility screens. And there's some of the voice control, adjusting the display, hearing aids, so many things. And even if it's not a USB, you might improve the usability and your conversion along the way. Whether or not people with disabilities use it, hopefully you're still improving these metrics as well. And then finally, accessibility benefits everyone in some way. Sometimes you've got a temporary disability or minor, so if you're short-sighted, it's technically a disability of some sort. And then, as I said before, if you've got an accessible site, it tends to be easier to use as well because you put the effort in to do it the right way. Accessibility, again, it correlates with search engine optimization, usability. So things like this, HTML structure, descriptive alt text, clear navigation, good copywriting. So, you know, good heading levels, breadcrumbs. All of these things will help a search engine. It will help anyone to use the site, and it's also good for screen readers and keyboard control as well. And finally, it's just the right thing to do, really. It's not. It's only fair that anyone can use the web in the same way that they can access any other type of business or service. So there's a few types of disability that are most relevant. So if you've got a physical or motor impairment, then you might have restricted motion or poor motor skills. You might not be able to use a mouse or a keyboard, or possibly both. So you could use an assisted switch like this, or you might have buttons that you control with your feet or your head. So visual impairments, so that's obviously blindness, but it's also partially sighted. You could be colourblind. And people with visual impairments often use screen readers or text-to-speech software. So an accessible site needs good colour contrast and the ability to change the font size and still have a working design. So can everyone see the two numbers on this picture? Is there anyone who can't? Okay. So yeah, so at least one person can't see that. Can everyone see what it is? Any? Okay. Did anyone think it was something else? Okay. So actually, as a crowd, you've done all right tonight, but there's always one person who can't see that. And if you can't see that, then maybe there's lots of other buttons and kind of contrast on web pages that you can't see as well. So if you've got a cognitive impairment, which could include dementia, any kind of memory problem, you might need some extra help extra instructions or help text on the page. You might need some more time to complete a purchase. So often when you're buying tickets on a website, you've got, say, 15 minutes. And the question is 15 minutes enough? Is there a way you could make it more doable in 15 minutes? Do you actually need a time limit at all? It's sort of thinking about those sorts of things. And then sort of using short, simple language where possible is always a good thing for all sorts of people. Dyslexia is quite a complex condition. A lot of people with dyslexia use screen readers or text-to-speech software, and they can struggle with all sorts of things like serif fonts, so these little ticks on the end of letters, very large blocks of text, thin or wide columns. A lot of people with dyslexia prefer not to have a plain white background, so they'll have an off-white colour. And there's so many other things, so it's sort of worth reading up on. And there's other things like epilepsy, photosensitivity, and then other learning difficulties where it might make it difficult to use the web in some way. So it's quite hard to adjust for all disabilities, but you can be aware of them and think, do I need to test with these people, or is there something I could do to make it easier for them? So this article, you'll be able to find the slides after. This article has kind of basically all this content and more, so it's worth a read. So in accessibility, there's some kind of key concepts as I understand them. Keyboard accessibility means being able to use the site with just a keyboard. So typically that's the tab bar, the space bar, return keys, arrow keys. I'm sure most people here will have filled in a form with the keyboard to just tab between fields and press enter. So with things like that, you're thinking about the order of the fields, as well as being able to access them. So if you tab to one field and then it goes somewhere else on the page, that's going to be quite frustrating. And then things like page navigation, so like multi-menus and drop-downs, custom interfaces, so drag and drop, for instance. If there's no keyboard alternative, then someone who doesn't use a mouse can't use those features. And typically, if you've got good keyboard accessibility, then alternative input device is going to pick up on those same adjustments as well. So if you use a screen reader, you might not be looking at a monitor. I mean, maybe you are, but often you can't see a monitor, or you can't use a monitor for some reason. So a screen reader should be able to access all the information in the same order as someone kind of visually looking at the page, so top to bottom, left to right. And this includes things like form labels, link text, alternative text on images. So these two pictures here, if I've not got all text on it, you don't know what these pictures are. And obviously they're illustrative. They tell you something extra. So someone who is using a screen reader wouldn't know what these are. They're missing something, even if they've got the main content. So a big one with that is content trapped in images. If you have important text in an image and there's no alt text, then it won't get read out by a screen reader. So WebAIM, which is an accessibility focused consultancy, has lots and lots of good guides on designing screen reader compatibility and also testing with it as well. So colour accessibility is that picture again. On the web, that means having labels and keys or pass-fail indicators on forms. These sorts of things should never be purely colour-based. So if you've got a red around a field when it's broken, then consider having like a tick icon or a cross and a tick icon, or a written error message as well. So colour contrast, these are all kind of different levels of contrast of colour. And would anyone like to guess which of these would pass compliance? Any guesses?
The always in red is probably done.
Yeah, that's right. So that red always, because it's bold and because it's quite big on the screen, that passes. If it was smaller and not bold, then it wouldn't. So really, all of these aren't ideal, even if most people in this room can read it. So Jerry Cody is a designer and front-ender, and she's written a great guide on this. So, some tools. This is a great little tool. You put in a colour in whatever format you like, background, foreground, and you can tweak it to try and get the right thing or just experiment. So in this case, I've got something that passes the 4.5 mark. Obviously works both ways. Let's see, grey. No, maybe light grey. So that's passable but not ideal. So obviously white or a different shade of red and orange is the way to go. These are some free screen readers. This is ChromeVox, which is a Chrome extension. VoiceOver is on Mac and iOS, and NVDA is Windows. So all of them are different, or lots of them have different quirks and bugs. The last time I gave this talk, NVDA worked best with Firefox, but unfortunately, Firefox in updating to a new framework has broken kind of some of the things that NVDA relied on. So it's sort of a bit of a hit and miss at the moment, but hopefully that will improve soon. So if you can, test with multiple ones. And you can find usage guides on the WebAIM website, because they're not easy things to use straight away, and there's lots of shortcuts and little tricks. So iOS has some great accessibility options which you can play around with. So this one is for counteracting different types of colour blindness, but you can sort of use it in reverse as well. So you can apply a filter to your screen and see, can you still see all the things on the page? Do they all make sense? Is there maybe a button that isn't so prominent anymore? So kind of try these out and see what you find. VoiceOver is not an easy thing to use at first, but there's a little practice area, and you can tweak the settings. And then this speech thing, I have this on all the time. If you select some text, you can have it speak out, and you can also swipe down with 2 fingers and it will just read out the whole page. So unfortunately I don't have internet this evening, so I can't do this bit, but I was going to go through and find some accessibility kind of pluses and minuses on the Money Supermarket site. But what I would say is look up this tool, install the Chrome extension, and give it a try for yourself. It will pick up problems, things that maybe you want to be aware of, and some features that are good things. So in this case, we've picked up 8 errors and also 38 contrast errors. So you can click through and you can find all those problems, and you get an explanation of what they are. So just looking at this picture, so the little red icon there, that means that it's a link without any text attached to it. So you're clicking on the whole thing, but it's not clear what that thing is. It doesn't like the here link, because that tells you nothing about that link. But on the plus side, you've got a H1 for the main title on the page. And then the logo has the same text. It is an alt text. So this is basically the Chrome equivalent to some extent of Wave, but it's more about code compliance rather than conforming to a spec. So you can audit any page and it will give you kind of errors, warnings, and things that are good. And you can also inspect an element and see what the accessibility properties are as well. So, if you're interested in this and want to take it a bit further, so if you're a tester, then you can listen to some pages of a screen reader. Use your site with just a keyboard. Just put away your mouse, and just see if you can kind of go through it in the same way that as if you were using a mouse. You can use Wave, as I showed in the screenshot, and you can also use. You can use what you find in an hour or so to maybe justify exploring it further, getting some proper time to look into it. And I think as a tester, advocacy is just as important as finding bugs. We want to improve the practice within our companies and advocate for less bugs in the first place. And I think accessibility is just the same thing. If you can make it accessible, then that's going to have positive effects on the business and the users as well. So if you're a developer, you want to get a bit deeper, Mozilla has accessibility docs, which are great. You could read the spec if you had a lot of free time on your hands. There's also an implementation guide, which is a bit more practical. And WebAIM, which I've mentioned a few times, has lots of resources. You could learn about ARIA, which is it's sort of an extension to HTML, and you can use it to effectively mark up interactive applications in a way that screen readers and other tools will understand, and you can audit your own work using all the tools I mentioned on the previous page. So thank you for listening, and I'd love any questions as well.